There's a specific moment that happens when you hit $300,000 for the first time. It's not pure excitement. It's something more complicated than that. Because on one hand, you've worked incredibly hard to get here. You sacrificed vacations, drove the older car, said no to things your friends were spending freely on. And now you're looking at a number that genuinely feels significant. But then you do the math, and you realize $300,000 still isn't retirement. It's still not real security. It's not the finish line you were picturing when you started this journey. And a quiet fear creeps in. What if this is as far as I get? My name is Anderson, and I need to show you something about $300,000 that most people completely miss. Because what I'm about to walk you through doesn't just change how you see this number. It changes how you see the entire game. Here's what most people believe when they hit $300,000. They think the road to $1 million is basically the same road that got them here, just longer. Keep saving. Keep grinding. Stay disciplined. Do what you've been doing and eventually the number climbs. That's the assumption. But here's the truth that separates people who stay stuck at $300,000 from people who turn it into real generational wealth. $300,000 is not the middle of your journey. It's the inflection point. It's the exact moment when mathematics stops working against you and starts working for you. And if you don't recognize that shift, if you don't change how you think and behave because of it, you will waste the most powerful wealth-building years you will ever have. Let me say that again. $300,000 is where everything changes. But only if you change with it. Think about what it actually took to get here. You probably spent years saving aggressively, living below your means while watching everyone around you upgrade their lifestyle. Getting from $0 to $75,000 felt like forever. $75,000 to $150,000 was slightly faster but still brutal. And even from $150,000 to $300,000, with compound interest starting to show up in small ways, it still required relentless, consistent discipline month after month. So you internalized this belief wealth building is linear. It's always going to feel this hard. Getting to $1 million just means doing what you did to get to $300,000 but roughly 3 more times. That is not how math works. Not even close. Here's the invisible threshold you just crossed without realizing it. $300,000 is the point where your money starts earning more than most people can realistically save from their salary. Let me show you exactly what I mean. If you're earning $90,000 a year and saving 25%, you're putting away about $22,500 annually. That's genuinely impressive discipline. But $300,000 invested at an average 8% annual return generates $24,000 a year, without you doing a single thing. Your money is now working harder than you are. That is the threshold. That is the moment compounding stops being something you read about in a book and becomes the primary engine driving your wealth forward. Most people hit this point and completely miss it. They keep living the same way, saving the same percentage, thinking the same thoughts, and they miss the shift entirely. Here's the psychological transformation that has to happen at $300,000. You have to stop thinking like someone building from nothing, and you have to start thinking like someone managing a machine. Up until now, your wealth came from your labor. You worked, you earned, you saved, and that's how the account grew. But from $300,000 forward, your wealth comes primarily from what your money does, not what you do. And that requires a completely different mindset. You're not just a saver anymore. You're an allocator. You're making decisions about where capital goes, how it's positioned, what it's working toward. And those decisions matter more now than how much you can squeeze from your next paycheck. Let me give you the numbers that make this real. You're 38 years old. You have $300,000 invested. You keep contributing $22,500 a year. Your portfolio earns 8% annually. Here's what happens. Year 1, you're at $346,000. $22,500 from your contributions. $24,000 from investment returns. Your money already slightly outweighed you. Year 5, you're at $486,000. Still feels like slow progress. But watch closely. Year 10, you're at $785,000. And of the growth since year 1, over $260,000 came from compounding, not from your paycheck. Year 15, you cross $1.2 million. Year 20, you're sitting at $1.9 million. And of that entire journey from $300,000 to $1.9 million, more than $1.1 million came from compounding. Not from grinding, not from getting a raise, not from working harder. Your money did the heavy lifting. You just had to get out of the way and let it. Now here's where the identity shift becomes absolutely critical. That one emotional decision just cost you potentially hundreds of thousands in future wealth. That's the danger at this level. The stakes are higher. The consequences compound just like the returns do. Here's something else that shifts completely at $300,000, where your biggest financial leverage actually comes from. When you had $30,000, a job offer paying $15,000 more per year was transformational. It was a 50% raise. Life-changing. But when you have $300,000 invested, that same $15,000 raise is nice. It's not nothing, but it is no longer the most powerful financial move available to you. You know what is? A 4% better return on your portfolio. 4% of $300,000 is $12,000 per year. Nearly the same impact as the raise, except you didn't have to negotiate for it, update your resume, or change jobs. You just had to allocate smarter. That is the shift. Your biggest financial leverage moves from career optimization to investment optimization. And most people, even smart, disciplined people, never make that mental transition. They keep obsessing over the salary conversation while completely ignoring the fact that their portfolio decisions now matter more. Now let me give you the big mistake that derails most people right at this exact moment. They treat $300,000 as permission to upgrade their life. And that shift in posture, that quiet confidence that comes from having genuine options, shows up in every interaction. People sense it. It changes outcomes. You get better offers, more respect, opportunities that simply wouldn't have existed when you were operating from scarcity. But that only works if the $300,000 is still there. If you spent it on lifestyle inflation, you are right back to desperate. The power comes from having it and not needing to touch it. And now the warning that destroys most people's trajectory at exactly this level. They start comparing themselves to people who got rich faster. They see someone who made a killing in real estate, or crypto, or a startup exit. And suddenly their boring, steady index fund strategy feels slow and small. So they start taking swings. They put $70,000 into something they don't fully understand because they're chasing the quick win. Sometimes it works. Usually it doesn't. And when it doesn't, they just cut their compounding base from $300,000 to $230,000. They set themselves back years trying to accelerate a process that was already working perfectly. The people who turned $300,000 into millions are not the ones who got lucky on risky bets. They're the ones who stayed boring, who kept contributing, who didn't panic sell, who didn't chase shiny objects, who just let the math do what math does when you give it time and consistency. Here's the final thing I want you to understand, and this is the one that changes everything if you actually internalize it. Every major purchase you make from this point forward isn't just costing you the nominal amount. is costing you the compounded amount. $70,000 boat today is $300,000 you won't have at retirement. A $40,000 home theater is $175,000 you're walking away from. These might be worth it. Some of them genuinely are. But you need to know the real number before you decide. Because most people are making six-figure decisions while thinking they're making five-figure ones. So here's what I want you to take from this. $300,000 is the most important milestone in your entire wealth-building journey. Not because it's a huge number in absolute terms, but because it's the exact point where the mathematics flip, where your money starts outworking your labor, where compounding becomes the dominant force shaping your financial future. What you do in the 5 to 10 years after hitting $300,000 will determine whether you end up comfortable, or whether you end up with something that changes your family's trajectory for generations. The path from $300,000 to $2 million is not harder than the path from $0 to $300,000. It's actually easier. The numbers accelerate. Returns compound on top of returns. But only if you don't sabotage the process. Only if you stay invested through the volatility. Only if you resist the urge to celebrate with lifestyle inflation. Only if you recognize that $300,000 is not the reward. It's the seed. You have time right now to protect that seed and let it grow into something that genuinely changes your life. Not a lot of time, but enough. Enough to commit to leaving it alone. Enough to keep adding to it even when the progress feels invisible. Enough to ignore the comparison traps and the market noise and the temptation to chase faster returns. Just stay the course. Let the math work. Trust that the compounding you cannot see yet is happening beneath the surface, building momentum that will eventually feel almost unstoppable. And 20 years from now, when you're looking at a portfolio worth millions, when you realize your money worked harder than you ever could have, when you understand that the decision to protect $300,000 instead of spending it was the decision that changed everything, you're going to remember this moment. The moment you learned that wealth isn't built by working harder. It's built by letting compounding run uninterrupted for as long as humanly possible. And the moment you decided to give it that chance. My name is Anderson.